Okay, I have really been looking forward to doing this video rant, kind of, but yeah. So, and I did a video about this on TikTok, but I need so much more time to go into this. Why didn't Bucky tell Steve about Isaiah? And was it the right thing to not tell Steve about Isaiah? Like I said, I need way more than 60 seconds to dive into this. So, at first glance at the scene, I think we all felt a similar way. We were like, Bucky, what the fuck? Like, why didn't you tell him? Why didn't you let Isaiah gain his recognition, rightfully so? Like, he could have been Captain America, and you kept on hiding him again from the world, just like the government did. And even worse, it seems like, oh, you're protecting your friend's white fragility, possibly, like Steve's feelings and all of this. Like, that's the first thought that came into my head and a lot of people's heads, honestly, right, when we watched that scene. But then I really sat back and I thought about it, and I think that it was communicated to me the best because of where the placement of the racial profiling scene was right afterwards. Because it showed that Bucky understood exactly what was going on as far as the race component. And I thought about it as a trauma survivor, as a trauma victim, and in my own experience. And I decided that, you know what, Bucky made the exact right call, I think. And this is an interesting conversation to have about, like, well-meaning white people, right? Like, you know who they are, like the social justice warriors. Like, they are gung-ho to fight these fights, and they are the ones that, like, don't really shy away from when the cloth is pulled over. They're like, oh my god, I can't believe that this shit has been happening this entire time. Let's fucking fight it. Let's fight it. Let's fight it. Let's fight it. And we love you guys, but it is very easy for you guys, for those people, and honestly, like, it's understandable because it's a blind spot, because how could you know this? Because this is not your lived experience. It's very easy for those people to forget the victim as an individual, not as the symbol that they are of, what happens to black people or people of color or women, etc., on a daily basis, on a regular basis, of that injustice. They forget about the victim as a person. That's very easy to do. It's easy for victims themselves to forget about themselves as victims, and that's very very important. Sometimes going after justice is not what's best for a victim's mental health. I know this because I am that person. If you guys have been following me since last year, you know that I posted an entire, the thing is, like, I posted an entire series last year about what happened to me in the Air Force, about my abuser, which now I'm coming to terms more and more that it was not only just racism, but it was also sexual harassment. And I did this because people were coming forward to me about the same person, the same woman that abused them in some different ways. People of color, and also white people that came to the defense of the people of color that she abused, and were also treated in the same way. And that's the whole reason why I posted my story. But posting my story meant having to tell my story, and having to tell my story meant having to recall all the worst memories of my life. The memories that I spend every day trying to forget all the time. Every waking moment, all of my energy, because I have PTSD from the experience, is spent trying to forget that. And I got it out. I don't regret doing it, but I was so stressed out. The depression that followed, the rage, the PTSD episodes, the flashbacks, the nightmares that followed, even though I knew I was doing the right thing, it was so exhausting. And the thing is, like, justice was never really served. The bitch is still out there. She's teaching at the University of North Dakota as a ROTC instructor, ruining other lives. I did all that. I shook up the Air Force a little bit. Some generals were nervous. Grand Forks Air Force Base was nervous. But justice was never really served. I had a back and forth with the president of UND who I used to work with, who I thought would do something because I thought that he was a person with a good heart, but he didn't. And after a while, I was like, you know what? The blood of the people that might harm themselves because of this woman is on your hands, because I can't do this anymore. I cannot keep on going back into my memories to pull this out, to keep on living this and then watch you disregard my experience while I'm trying to save lives here. I can't. It took such a toll on me that I could not have possibly predicted. And so, and I'm now at a point where I'm like, I know that bitch is still out there living, and she has not gotten what's coming to her, or that should come to her, but that is not where my energy can be placed right now. My energy right now is placed on finding my peace and healing. And that's why I understand what Bucky did, because what I think is that Bucky did keep this away from Steve because of Steve, but I think it's because Bucky knew his friend. Bucky knew what Steve would do if Steve found out about Isaiah. And we all know, we can't pretend that, we all know that Steve Rogers is not that kind of person that would shy away from it. If Steve Rogers found out about Isaiah Bradley, like I said in my TikTok video, Steve Rogers would take a shit on the steps of Capitol Hill if it meant getting Isaiah money, medals, and a public apology. But you know what that means? That means bringing Isaiah back bringing him into the forefront, which at first glance, it objectively seems like a good thing, right? But it also requires Isaiah, again, to tell the story, to relive those moments, those years that he was locked up as an animal, tortured, experimented on. Like I said, which are actually things that happened to Black people back then, Tuskegee experiments and such. And the fact that it also makes you a target because people still ain't shit. So there would be people out there trying to kill him. Maybe to shut up the secret, maybe just out of pure hate, you know? And even if the support was overwhelming for Isaiah, like it was for me when I was telling my story, there's still no guarantee that Isaiah would even get the justice he deserves. And honestly, at this point, there's probably no way that he could, because even if he got a public apology, that'd probably be a slap in the face. I think it would be for me, because after 30 years or so of treating me like this, like, it doesn't make that experience go away. You know? You can't undo that trauma. You can't undo that trauma, and all the people that did that to him are probably long gone. Like, it's a very, very complicated thing. And it's like, objectively, is it the right thing to bring Isaiah Bradley into the public eye and say, this man should have been the next Captain America, but he wasn't because he was Black and they treated him like an animal? Yes, of course, objectively it is. But for Isaiah, think about that. And maybe you can't understand unless you've been a trauma victim. I feel like I do, because I've been there. I feel like I've been both Isaiah and Steve, because the only reason that I came out to tell my story was because I saw other people. But even then, I had to ask their opinion. I had to ask their consent. Can I share your story? Can I say your name? Like, what do you want? And I think that's what a lot of well-meaning white people, or just people that fight for justice in general, forget to ask the victim, what is best for you? What can I do? What is okay for me to say? Do you want me to do anything, or do you want me to do nothing at all? Do you have the energy for this? I think Bucky saw that Isaiah didn't have the energy for that. And Bucky, in this world, is probably one of the few people that can understand what Isaiah has gone through outside of the race component, but Bucky has been experimented on as well. You know, Bucky went through that as well. He is familiar with that trauma minus the race component, but he is familiar with that trauma. And I feel like he probably feels, you know, he's sympathetic or empathetic to him because he's been through similar shit. And so, like I said, I think that Buckley rightly assessed the situation because he knew exactly what Steve would do. Steve would try to get justice. But the thing is, unfortunately, sometimes going for justice comes at the expense of the victim's mental health, especially when it comes to race. And in this moment, it's not, whether you like it or not, it's not about what's objectively right. Sometimes it's about what is best for the victim right now. And not every victim is required to be a light on a hill, a shining example, or like, you know, a political piece. Some victims just need to heal. And unfortunately, the reality is that for a lot of victims, justice never comes, can never come, will never come because of the world we live in. Peace and healing is something that's possible and obtainable. And that's a hard thing to juggle. It's a hard thing to come to grips with. But it is real, and I do think that it teaches a very important lesson, that when we're out here fighting these fights and trying to do what's right and make the world a better place, you gotta remember the individuals, which I think is what Bucky did. There's also the thought of like, when did Bucky even have time to tell Steve any of this or whatever? And even if he told Steve that, we got to believe that Steve would, you know, honor Isaiah's wishes if Isaiah still said, leave me the fuck alone. But regardless, it's still bringing one more person into the picture. And that would still be disrespectful to Isaiah. And even though I think Steve would be the kind of person that would ask permission, can I share your story? Can I do this for you? Like I said, it would still be bringing someone else into the picture without asking Isaiah, and that's wrong, regardless of the intention. So that is why I think Bucky did the right thing. Because unfortunately, I am familiar with, or at least that scene and the scenario brought up a lot of feelings of my own. And I think that gave me some insight into the situation. And so, yeah, that's why I think Bucky did the right thing.